Let's everybody be seated and kind of quieten down, class. Here we go. Good. Okay. I'm Bruce Shelton. It's my honor to be the host of ceremonies today. And we've got the thing that's brought us all together today is one person who's touched all of our lives in different ways, every one of us. And I don't know about you, but I can just feel the love in this group, And as we all know, Francis suffered from a real serious hearing deficit. But I'm told that when you cross over to the other side, that all of our faculties come back 100-fold. So, Francis, we know you can hear us. This is all about you, Francis. Enjoy this service. So we're here. There's two things we do today at a service like this. Is number one, there's an element of sadness. I've had several people in tears already, and because we love Francis, and as has been said at many ceremonies like this in the past, grief is the price we pay for love, and so let's honor our feelings. If a lot of us miss Francis, we will not be seeing him again, at least on this earth plane. So there's a sense of loss, and we want to honor that. The other reason we're here, and I think many of us might think this is even more important, is that we're here to celebrate Francis's life. My goodness, 86 years, what a productive life, I think everything he wanted to do, he was able to do. And, Francis, one person mentioned to me he was a Renaissance man. He was talented in so many areas. He was a graphic artist. He worked with Venture Inward. We'll hear more about that in a little bit. For many years, he was a potter, a chef. I had many dinners at my house, and he'd cook, and everybody raved about his dinners. And he'd always kind of lighten up. He loved that. He was a singer. I think that was maybe his greatest love was music. And he was in, I think, every singing group there existed out there, he'd find it. And today we're so honored by the Sounds of Joy. They're going to be here to sing two songs at the end. And lastly, he was, there are other things too, but he was a massage therapist and a real master of the KC techniques on massage, not just for relaxation, but for healing. My wife, Marty, who was a nurse for over 40 years, she said of Francis that he was not a massage therapist, he was a doctor. And he was a doctor of alternative medicines using the KC methods. And coming from her, she knew what a doctor was. And that was a great compliment, and I think it really is beautiful and accurate, and not an overstatement. So we have a program today. It's going to have some beautiful music. We'll have some guest speakers come up. Tom's going to give the eulogy. And so that's the service. So the first person we'd like to invite is Cheryl Bernash. She's going to sing some of her beautiful music.
You still hearing me? There we go. Yay! Thanks, Kevin. So I told Bruce that I wouldn't really say anything because we don't want the service to go long, but you just switched me with Chris. And Chris, like, usually says a lot. No, I won't do it. So, I just wanted to say Francis was my massage school teacher when I first got here in 91, and I thought he was so cute. And when he set me up with a friend of his, I knew he wasn't interested. So This song is my prayer for Francis. So, I know he can hear us now, and he's loving it. Wherever you are, may the meadows be green, may the rivers run clear, playing games with the light. Wherever you are, may the sunlight be warm, may the breezes blow gently, may the showers fall softly, may you walk in the garden of love. May the shadows be harmless as children. May you walk in the garden of love. May the shadows be harmless as children. Wherever you are, may the mountains be grand, may the valleys be peaceful, may your heart know your home. Wherever you are, may you sing your heart song, may the melody linger, may the echo live on, may you walk in the garden of love. May you see all your fears were illusions. May you walk in the garden of love. May the shadows be harmless as children.
Following is a poetry reading from one of Francis's most treasured authors, Cahill Gibran, and it's entitled On Death. And it's taken from the prophet booklets of readings. Then Almitra spoke, saying, "We would ask now of death." And he said, "You would know the secret of death, but how shall you find it unless you seek it in the heart of life? The owl whose night-bound eyes are blind unto the day cannot unveil the mystery of light. If you would indeed behold the spirit of death, open your heart wide until the body of life. For life and death are one, even as the river and the sea are one. In the depth of your hopes and desires lies your silent knowledge of the beyond. And like seeds of dreaming beneath the snow, your heart dreams of spring. Trust the dreams, for in them is hidden the gate of eternity. Your fear of death is but the trembling of the shepherd when he stands before the king, whose hand is to be laid upon him in honor. Is the shepherd not joyful beneath the trembling that he shall wear the mark of the king? Yet is it not more mindful of his trembling? For what is it to die but to stand naked in the wind and to melt in the sun? And what is it to cease breathing but to free the breath from its restless tides, that it may rise and expand and seek God uncumbered? Only when you drink from the river of silence shall you indeed sing. And when you have reached the mountaintop, then you shall begin to climb. And when the earth shall claim your limbs, then shall you truly dance. Brother Francis, we love you and we miss you. And as you are roaming around your new digs and you come across Robert, say hello to him, your old sidekick. You guys are going to have a grand time up there. Amen.
You're not wondering if I'm really Cheryl in disguise anymore, are you?
Not even close.
Well, thank the good Lord for little favors, huh? As my granny used to say, good Lord, Miss Agnes. I wonder who that is. Any of you have an experience with Agnes? Is there anybody here named Agnes? 3 or 4, okay. Well. All right. So, you know, I tried to do stand-up comedy one day, and they yelled at me to sit down, and I've been sitting down telling jokes ever since. But let's see, I think I need to, you know, it's always good if you're going to share anything potentially meaningful with people to make sure you're plugged in. Oh, good Lord, I'm beside myself. They must be using some of that AI stuff to enhance me, I know. See, okay. You can dress him up, but you can't take him. Well, there's a few places you can take. Some further help might be needed, but So this song was written for a ordination. Now that's interesting. That was more than a Freudian slip there. It was written for a memorial service about a decade or two ago when a friend of a friend had passed, and this came through. And it's been sung and shared for a lot of different memorial services and celebrations of life since then. And it's from the perspective of someone who has crossed over to the other side and is wanting to comfort those who he loved and loved them. And so if you can kind of superimpose Francis up here singing to you, that would be a blessing that I would love to have manifest. And if you know the chorus, let's see what happens. Okay, let's see. Having been a sound man myself, one of the most potentially unappreciated positions in the world is being a sound man at times like this. But, you know, hello? That's okay. We can change positions. That's not only, you know what? I can project. And I turned it on, didn't I? It's nice to know that at age 75 I can still turn things on. Well, come on. We're all woke enough, aren't we? We've known for a while that the day would come. Everyone here is just passing through. When the time arrives, there's no holding back from crossing to see our eternal destiny. I will see you over the mountain, up that highway to the other side, where our love is forever shining within the glory of God's light. Sometimes it's so hard to understand the reason why we go through times of trial and sorrow. But the love in you will pull you through, and you will see love is alive everywhere and all there be. I will see you over the mountain, up that highway to the other side, where our love is forever shining within the glory of God's light. There's more here than meets the eye. Though you can no longer see me, I'm with you now in the love we share, and there is where you find me. And I will see you over the mountain, up that highway to the other side, where our love is forever shining within the glory of God's light, within the glory of God's light, within the glory of God's light.
Well, now we have to figure out whether the microphone is Can y'all hear me? Oh, yes, yes, good. Well, Bruce already kind of did this, but I'd like to welcome Francis to his memorial service. And also, I'm thinking of Martha Rappaport, who lived next door to Francis for many, many years, and who I met when I was sharing the house with Francis. I met Francis Sporer the way you probably met him, or many of you probably met him. I needed help. I needed a place to live because I was teaching at the seminary, and I had the summers free. And I wanted to spend the summers at the A.R.E. So I called the A.R.E. up and asked for a job, and they gave me one. I was director of sharing groups, and I did that for 5 years, living with Francis Sporer. Now, it was at Francis Sporer's house that I met Christian King and Martha, who lived next door. There was a constant stream of people coming through his house. So many, in fact, that I began to think of Francis as a spiritual mayor of Virginia Beach. Francis helped people in a holistic way. He started with the physical. He was a massage therapist. Then he moved to the psychological and then the spiritual. He was a doctor of the body, the heart, and the soul. He was something. He taught people how to meditate, read palms, and to eat so they could be healthy. He also talked about reincarnation, which I loved, since I have believed in reincarnation since I was 9 years old and started reading Edgar Cayce. Now, Americans do not believe in reincarnation. So it was my little secret that I used to carry around. And I would sometimes shock my classmates by saying, "Who were you last time?" Say, "What do you mean last time? What are you talking about?" So I had no one to talk to about reincarnation, and then Francis came along and we talked about reincarnation for hours. Francis believed in wonderful things. He believed in Carl Jung and Rudolf Steiner, in the mystery schools, in the history of the mystery schools, in the Fellowship of the Inner Light as a mystery school. He was really impressive, but a little weird, because he believed all these things. But he got everybody interested in the spiritual. I started getting readings when I was living at his house. People would come by, and I had about 19 readings a summer, and I was often told my past lives, which were impressive to me because I had always been in spiritual work. And I was thinking of leaving the Catholic Church. I was a priest at the time. And Francis so encouraged me to leave. He said, "Get out of there. It's tight. It's close. It's rigid." And Francis was not rigid. No. He also got me interested in past life regressions, which I added to my counseling practice, much to the chagrin of my partners. People would come in and they would say, "Well, I want to find out who I used to be." And the people would say, "What? Who you used to be?" "Yes, in other lifetimes." And everybody started talking about reincarnation. Francis was very influential with the people he knew, and they were influential to the people they knew. So it started to get around that reincarnation was all right. Francis was also a consummate artist and served as the artistic director of Venture Inward, like Bruce said, the A.R.E. magazine. And as someone has said, he was a Renaissance man. But the greatest thing that Francis taught was how to live and how to help. He taught people the value of curiosity and vigor and thinking outside the box. How to live as a generous individual. An individual with a generous heart. Francis Sporer was most of all the spirit of joy and possibilities. Truly the spiritual mayor of Virginia Beach and gentle brother to the world. May he rest in peace and dance among the stars. And let me say, from my own heart and from yours, Francis, thank you.
We're now going to have several speakers, and then first I'd like to invite Judy Stevens.
Hello. I'm not going to try to talk about Francis so much because there are a lot of people here who will follow me who will. I appreciated Francis as a creative artist, a human being, and as a person who loved music and singing. He loved people, and he loved celebrating and hosting gatherings, as many of you know. But today I'm here to speak on behalf of my friend, A.R.E. Robinson. She had a close relationship with Francis. She's worked here at the A.R.E. for 40 years and is still associated with the spa giving colonics. A former teacher at the Casey Riley Massage School, she became a close friend of Francis over the years and asked me to share these thoughts with you. This is what she had to say about Francis. Francis was deep. He was a storehouse of knowledge. Over the years, he worked with a number of A.R.E. speakers. He massaged them and advised them. She said, "I had lunch with Francis twice a month when I was a massage therapist, and he helped me in my own practice. I worked with Francis as an assistant in the second semester class, teaching the Casey massage. Francis took the class further and created his own graduate session, can't you see it, of the Casey massage that he taught to A.R.E. and to other students. Francis was a great instrument in the Casey Riley School and in the whole arena of the A.R.E. We loved him. He was developed spiritually, and I valued him, she said, as a friend and a tutor. Like others, I was one of Francis's groupies. Will the groupies please raise your hand? Who went to most of his Sounds of Joy concerts and dinners that I enjoyed immensely. Francis had a rare ability to support others. And in closing, I'd just like to share a line from the famous Welsh poet Dylan Thomas. He said, "And death shall have no dominion." Thank you.
Dale Barney's going to speak next.
Excuse me a second here. Being a lawyer, you always have to have exhibits. Francis Sporer, January 1940, June 2026. Francis thought that the most important thing that I might be able to tell you today is about the people that impacted his life. Therefore, in the next 5 minutes Bruce has given me, I'm going to try to fill in the dots and the dash between those dates. First, let me start by saying most of you people know I'm Dale Burning and that I'm a licensed trial lawyer in Virginia and 4 other states. What people don't know about me is that I was born a psychic. At age 17, I first read about Edgar Cayce in the book The Sleeping Prophet and by Jeff Stern, and immediately joined the A.R.E. and later became a life member. In the 1980s, after passing the bar, I moved to Virginia Beach to start law practice with Christopher Naughton and Russell Robertson. And my primary purpose of moving here was to study and read the Edgar Cayce readings in the library and to join this spiritual family. Francis was one of the people that I met when I moved here. The A.R.E., the Fellowship of Inner Light, Unity Church, Course in Miracles, Search for God study groups. If I drew a Venn diagram between me and Francis, there would be a small list of common interests, but the one thing that we did like was the Edgar Cayce readings, choral singing, and living a spiritual, psychic life by prayer and meditation. What Francis wanted you to know are the important people, the teachers, the mentors, the friends that fill in that gap, that dash between the dates that gave his life meaning. In the A.R.E., when we moved here, was an amazing place back then, and we could actually talk to the people that were here. Some of those people were Hugh Lynn Cayce. Used to take walks with him in the park. Gladys Davis Turner had an office in the hospital, the old hospital building, and like next door to where Francis's office was. Herb Puryear, Shirley Winston Rabb, Bill and Gladys McGarry, Dr. Eric Mean and his wife Catherine, Harmon and June Bro, Elsie Sechrist, Carol Bush, Mark Thurston, Dolores Krieger, Avram, you might remember him at the front desk, Robert Krajinski, Tom Johnson owned the Heritage Store and sold Cayce products, David Revelet, Cheryl Bernath, Bruce Shelton, Tom Baker, myself. Francis Sporer was the art director of the Venture Inward. Joan Kennedy, the director of the Sound for Music. Jonelle and Ben Nix and the singers I'm sure are here today. Paul Solomon, the psychic, Unity Renaissance Church. Course in Miracles led by Tom Baker. There was a second major organization called the Fellowship of the Inner Light, followed by its founder, Paul Solomon, who was a psychic. And this is a group of spiritually gifted musicians, artists, healers, and psychics, some of which are here today. Paul Solomon, David Solomon, Stephen Haslam, Chris Van Cleve, John Christian, Jerry Teplitz, Tom Johnson, David Riblet, Sharon Bernath, Francis Sporer, Judith Davidson Kisselstein, Grace DeRon Riciopo, Russell Robertson, James Yax, Chris Arbo, Lloyd Kramer, Susan Thomas, Tom Baker, Brian Berry, Doug Burns, Heidi Gibson, Bruce Shelton, Sharon Solomon, Annalia and Josh Atkinson, Larry Jennings, Dick Dingus, Stephen Poplin, Grace and Ramasan Yusik, Robert Krajinski, and many others that are here today, and some of them that have passed over. In his final days, my friend A.R.E. Remeter, who's here with me, and I visited Francis in his home and did laying on of hands healings and foot massage. It took, it worked. It really worked. And Francis always managed to smile and open his eyes in gratitude. I told Francis that I would be his wingman across the veil if he wanted me to make that trip. And I had the experience and the training, having lived a prior life in Egypt and worked in the Temple of Sacrifice. Anyway, Francis knew this, and the night before he crossed, when I was there, I heard him speaking with a group of several people that I couldn't see, and laughing a lot, and he was happy. And he said that he was going to go with his new group of friends. So in closing, the last words that Francis wanted you to hear is that the way to grow old happily is to experience better things right up to the end of life and even beyond that. A good life is a growing, expanding life, and an ever-widening horizons, an ever greater critics circle of friends and acquaintances, and an ever greater opportunity for usefulness. And finally, in the words of the Apostle John, 1 John 4:7, the secret sauce is, let us love one another because God is love. Thank you, Francis. Thank you for listening.
Ben Nick will be our next speaker.
Relax, this won't hurt a bit. Well, hello, friends, family of Francis. I think he would like that alliteration. And I would like to add, Dale, I didn't hear one name that I know Francis would have loved to have had mentioned, and that's someone that the Sounds of Joy loves, Gene Reeder, who passed some time ago. Jean was just part of Francis's heart, and he was heartbroken when she passed. So I just wanted to make sure her name got in there. And when Bruce asked me to be one of 3 speakers today to talk for 6 minutes, it's a very specific number, about my friend Francis.
He gave me 5.
Not sure what's going on there, but I didn't say yes immediately. I mean, Francis was always the one with the gift to be able to speak eloquently and engagingly on just about any subject off the cuff, and he often did, at considerable length. My wife and I would sit across the table at No Frill Grill or Village Inn or Applebee's in the early years of our friendship and listen with wonder for hours, often as our food got cold, as he recounted the many synchronicities and personal revelations in his life, and especially his knowledge and understanding of Edgar Cayce's life, mission, and holistic health regimens. Often, well, Occasionally, I would contribute something to the conversation, but mostly I just love listening to him. Anyway, I suppose it was unreasonable to expect Francis to speak tonight, so I told Bruce I would do it. So tonight, at least for the next 6 minutes, I talk and Francis listens. You're listening, Francis? Ours was a friendship centered around music and choral singing that started in the early 90s when we both discovered a small group of like-minded singers called the Joyful Noise. We both loved to sing and perform, and we were attracted to the group's mission, which is to bring joy through music to underserved communities. Now, I don't want this to be about the choir we both loved. This is about Francis. He was a natural leader who was also a gifted artist and a man who loved to serve. When the group reorganized itself in 1998 as the Sounds of Joy, Francis was its first president. And after that, he was our membership director right up until he physically couldn't do it anymore. Francis and I and a few other movers and shakers in the group spent long hours in those years, often late into the wee hours of the morning, emailing each other with draft after draft of the new Sounds of Joy Constitution, bylaws, and member handbook. His emails were, well, they are legendary, both for their sheer length and for their vision. Francis really believed in service, and he lived it, always keeping the group's focus on its mission. It was easy to get distracted with showbiz dreams as we began to improve vocally and musically under our new director, Joan Kennedy. Not that he didn't love the showbiz part. He was heavily involved in the CDs our group created over the years, all of the artwork required for the CD covers, playbills, posters, and brochures, all of it he gladly donated. And that included untold hours of fighting with bulky computers, printers, and graphics software to produce materials that would have cost us thousands of dollars if we had to buy it. I would often get a phone call or an email late at night asking for an opinion on a new graphic for the group. He and I trusted each other's artistic eye and each other's hearts, more importantly, where our musical family was concerned. But I don't recall ever making a significant recommendation. Francis was simply spot on nearly 100% of the time. Francis and I were also part of smaller groups like the Cat's Meow over the years, groups with similar missions but more emphasis on showbiz. He loved the costuming side of that. Though somehow, I was always the one who wound up wearing the grass skirt and coconut bra, and there's nothing like a dame. When I think of Francis now, and that's often, I always see him as Nicely Johnson. And sit down, you're rocking the boat from the Broadway musical Guys and Dolls. Francis dressed the part exactly as Nicely Johnson described it in his dream. Broad-shouldered, wide-lapel checkered coat, a polka dot bow tie, a bright red felt fedora with a peacock feather, and white spats. Francis wore that red fedora often. Seemed to me to be part of him, and I was always jealous of his dense, full head of white hair that peeked out from under the brim, and you can see why. But for all of his love of music and participation in various groups, Francis was so much more than that. As a practitioner of the Riley method of massage, he treated athletes, singers, actors, and celebrities all over the world. He was so well loved and effective in his therapies that he was given trips abroad to minister to groups who were familiar with him and his techniques. He was not one to say this about himself, but I believe him to be a healer. He let his hands speak for him. Francis was a wonderful massage therapist and holistic medicine healer using the KC principles. And I don't use the title healer lightly. I'm the original doubting Thomas when it comes to those claims from anyone. But I have had so many friends speak of their personal experiences. And I have had my own experience with Francis in that regard. Some years ago, I was having chronic back pain. Francis kept noticing me complaining about that at our after-dinner rehearsals and our after-rehearsal dinners that we were having, and he offered to work on me. Now, if you've ever been worked on by Francis, you know how intuitive and powerful his hands and fingers were. So the day came, and I found myself face down on Francis's massage table. After several minutes of exploratory massage in the general area where I was feeling pain, he focused intense and insistent pressure on one spot away from that area for what seemed like an eternity. Just when I thought his finger was going to go all the way through me, I felt intense and pointed pressure in another location, and I winced, thinking he was applying another finger. He noticed my discomfort and said simply, "That wasn't me." That wasn't me. I walked out of his house quite sore and not at all certain that anything had improved. But during the next week, my pain went away and has not returned. Of course, I wondered who wasn't me was. But I decided that gratitude rather than investigation was the best mode to be in. So I say without hesitation that Francis is indeed a healer. And that would probably have been the last thing he would ever volunteer about himself. Francis came to this world with a mission. And I imagine he's already choosing his next incarnation. Perhaps some of you, no, this group is too old. But perhaps one of your children will be the chosen to love and protect his beautiful spirit in his or her next earthly mission. I remember on one occasion, and I love this, that Francis had a dream that he and I were troubadours in 17th century Europe. We danced, juggled, and sang at small towns around Europe. We never made it to court. That always seemed fitting to me. Here we are doing the same thing in this life, well, minus the dancing and juggling. You can all be thankful for that. I have only great memories of Francis in the brief time our lives coincided. I wish I could have known him when we were both younger men. And by the way, I think his brother James will be speaking. He's written a beautiful and lengthy obituary that puts his brother's life in perspective, chronologically in considerable detail. If you haven't read that, I would please encourage you to take the time to read it. I know I felt I knew Francis better after I read that obituary. Francis, my friend and brother, I hope you haven't been bored. This is probably more than you've ever heard from me in one sitting during this life. God bless you, and I'm sure I will see you again.
Christian King Sparrow.
Spiro. Very Italian. When I told Bruce that I'd be glad to get up here and speak, I think I misspoke. As I got into writing and rewriting to try to honor his 5 minutes to be up here. So I did the best I could, Bruce, but I'm not a professional speaker, so I'm really pleased that you are loving, kind, and compassionate and forgiving people. Because I'll do the best I can. Being hearing impaired since 5th grade, I don't always hear the S sounds. They're the silent sounds of the English language, so sometimes I don't say them well, so just bear with me, you'll get it. But Frances and I met in 1975. We've had a 50-year friendship relationship. We were in mid-Missouri. We were both Midwesterners, had the same kind of values. And we were in 2 Search for God study groups. In Columbia, Missouri, where the University of Missouri was, where I graduated with my undergraduate degree. And then when I moved to Fulton, Missouri, where he lived and taught art to a women's college at William Woods, I had 2 friends. And those 2 friends wanted to know more about Edgar Cayce, and so we started a Search for God group there. Recently, I went to see a healing practitioner where I live because I wasn't doing well with my grief. It was stuck in my body and I wasn't expressing it well. So I went to this woman I've been seeing and told her what I needed. I got on the table. She started working on me. She was at my feet and I felt hands on my abdomen. That's happened before. She said, "Oh, Raphael and Michael come to help me sometimes." So I thought that's who that was. But at the end of the session, she said, did you feel anything? I said, "Well, I felt this hand on my abdomen. Was it Raphael or Michael?" She said, "Oh, no." She said, "That was Francis." And she said, "He wanted me to tell you that I was the sister he never had in his male sibling group." So he's still here. He still comes to visit. When he was in William Woods as a practicing art instructor, he wanted a change, or felt he needed to change. He went to California to be in a spiritual consciousness program, and he was going to move to California, quit his teaching job and move there. Well, he had a dream. If some of you know, he kept a dream journal. He stayed up late and stayed in late because he wanted to capture his dreams, and in this dream, he had an audio dream. He had friends in Virginia Beach. He knew he came here frequently every summer, but he had this consciousness thing in California, and he was going to move to California until this audio dream, "East is east, west is west, and the wrong one I have chose." So he said, "Nope, not going to California, going to Virginia Beach." No job. He just had friends and faith. The one job he had was nanny with Mary and Mark Thurston. Kind and gentle soul he was. That was a good fit. He calls me and introduces me and tells me about Mary and Mark, and they had this program and they needed a special ed teacher for this program. And so I talked to them and I said, "Yeah, I think I'll move and do that." I'd been working at the Hearns Youth Center at the Fulton State Hospital with emotionally disturbed kids. So I said, "Yeah, I'll sell my house and just put in my car what I can and move to Virginia Beach." That was a real adventure. Because that program wasn't meant to be, and I was left without a job. However, I had flown out to California to visit Francis and have a vacation and a good time, and we did, and he introduced me to a woman named Rose Reed. Well, she had family here in Norfolk. She moved back to Norfolk when I went out to Virginia Beach, and she says, "Oh, you can come and work with us at my facility at Eastern Virginia Medical Authority." So I had a job. It was meant to be. A year later, the place where I was working had been shut down. So I had to change anyway. So I made my own spiritual change. It was a good one. We were great housemates. It just worked out. We didn't plan to be housemates. That wasn't in the mix, but he needed a housemate when I moved up here, and he said, "Do you want to live here?" And I said, "Sure, because I don't have any place to go now." Because Mary and Mark Thurston gave me notice, which was fine. I'd been there long enough. So I moved in with him. the only kerfuffle we ever had. We got along really well because we were Midwesterners. We had the same values. I said, Francis, I'm doing all the housework. I said, we need to come up with a better plan. What do you want to do? Well, it wasn't, I'll vacuum and you can do dishes. I mean, oh no, his great idea that I agreed with, let's hire Karen Tangetti to do the housework. Then neither one of us have to clean. I said, sounds good to me. So that's what we did. So after about 3 years of living with him, everything was great, but I wanted my own place. So Greg Casey helped me find a townhome. He wasn't very happy about it, but he accepted it. So I lived there a couple of years, and then Spirit and a crummy place I was working in that I didn't like, and my mom said, I'll pay for you to move back. I said, okay. And so I moved back to Kansas City. I got my MSW degree from KU. I met my husband, Ron Sporer. And Francis, whose brother lives in Lee Summit, it worked out just perfectly. That's about 20 miles southeast of Kansas City. And my husband and I decided we would move to Lee Summit because it was halfway to both of our jobs and halfway to my aging mother that we needed to be there quickly sometimes. But James was in Lee Summit, so when Francis would come in June in the summers, we'd all get together and do fun things. And one time, we were all at breakfast, including my mother, and he noticed she's putting cream and Splenda in her caffeinated coffee, and he starts in on his nutritional advice to my mother, how that's not good for you and it can harm you. And when he was done, my mother looked at him and said, Francis, do you really think it makes a difference when you're 93 years old? That was the one time he was speechless. Okay. In June, he came to be one of the groomsmen at my wedding. He left his earth suit on our wedding anniversary. Meryl Ann says he was giving you a wink. I just think he doesn't want me to forget him. At Christmas time, James, Francis, and myself would always have Christmas dinner, and of course I was raised by a 1950s mother, so I did the turkey and the dressing and the mashed potatoes and the whole business, and they came and they just loved that food because they both like to eat. But I will miss him reminding me, leave those potato peelings in that mashed potatoes. And with that, I say amen.
Wow. I know that Francis is thrilled that all of you are here today to celebrate his life. And I want to tell you that I have written exactly 2 minutes on here. So I told Bruce that I would read it so it will be fast. But I do want to say that I'm totally impressed by things that I did not know about Francis, although I've known Francis for years. I was the head of the Cat's Meow, and he was in it and never missed a rehearsal, never missed a show. And we did it for 4.5 years. So that, but now I'm listening to what everybody else has to say about Francis. Wow, it's just so impressive and so wonderful. I mean, you know, on the edge of things that people do certain things, and you think, oh, well, that's nice. But sitting here and listening to how impactful it was and how crowded it was with things that you do, I just don't know how he ever had a minute to do anything else but be with all of these groups, mine included. Okay, so now I'm going to read. If I had to describe Francis in one word, it would be honorable. Francis was an honorable person. He honored his commitment to any group he joined. If you were lucky enough to have Francis on your team or as a friend, you were lucky enough. He did his utmost to support every group he belonged to, and there were many along the way. The Sounds of Joy, ODU's Chorus, the Virginia Beach Chorale, the Association for Research and Enlightenment, and of course the Fellowship of the Inner Light. That's just to name a few. And sandwiched in there somewhere, for 4.5 years, Francis performed with my group, the Cat's Meow. We entertained at senior communities in Hampton Roads with our 20s, 40s, and 50s shows. There was singing and movement and a storyline in each show. And after the show, we would all go to the audience and chat with those attendees. They loved it, and Francis was the best of all at chatting with them. Who knew? As many of you know, Francis was very creative. He donated his talent by creating our logo and our brochures and flyers, and of course his singing and performing. He also made us a large sign to display at each show. He was a dedicated performer and never missed a show, as I had told you before. One Christmas, we did do a show that was not for senior communities. We did it for the children who could not go home for Christmas, and they were in the CHKD hospital. So Francis, and we all dressed like kids and sang funny Christmas songs for the children, I wanted to say, but guess what? They all went home except for one little girl. And we did that total show for one little girl, and she loved it. But Francis had created, as one of his other talents that he did, 3 huge plywood cookies and painted them to look like Christmas cookies. And they had a hole in the middle so we could stick our faces through when we were singing. Francis, I want you to know how grateful I am that you were part of my group, and also to thank you for being a good friend to me. It has been an honor to be called your friend. My parting words to you are, Francis, I love you, I bless you, and I appreciate you. And if you'd like to say that with a group, with me, let's just change it to we. Francis, we love you, we bless you, and we appreciate you. So Francis, may peace, joy, and happiness be always yours wherever your path leads you.
For our last speaker, I'd invite James Sporer up.
I hope I don't need this, but perhaps I will, so I'll put it here. Like most people who do public speaking seem to have water handy, and for a reason. I'm glad that all of you are here today. I know a lot of you have been very participatory in cleaning out his condo, which has been a monumental task, and somebody saved one of the birthday cards that I had sent him. And I think it pretty well encapsulates what I intend to talk about, so I'll read it. He didn't save all of them, so this must have meant something to him. It says, "Brother, when we were growing up, I'll get this.
Okay, take a deep breath.
I know, I do. We had our little ways of driving each other crazy. You knew how to push my buttons, and I knew how to push yours. I also knew that if I was ever in trouble and really needed somebody to help, you'd be right there for me. And you were, time after time. I realize I probably never thanked you or let you know how much it meant.
having me for my brother. But there is no better time than your birthday to say, thank you for being there for me. Knowing that I had you to count on made all the difference in the world, and it still does. A lot of what I wanted to say today will wrap around that theme. Francis Blaise Sporer, well, let me rephrase that. Francis Blaise Joseph Sporer. I didn't know his confirmation name, and I was kind of chagrined at that. It's just something we had never talked about. And when I found out it was Joseph, and you may have seen a picture up here of our grandfather on my dad's side. He was in uniform, had the big mustache. He was in the Austrian army back in the late 1800s when the emperor was Franz Joseph. His name was Blaise, Francis Blaise Joseph Sporer. I had never made that connection until just recently. I don't know why Dad and Mom named him that. I never knew that Franz Joseph meant that much to them, but apparently they did. Tom, thank you very much for speaking. You know, there was an old adage that vaudevillians had, and later people that were on variety shows like Ed Sullivan. And the adage was, never follow children's acts or animal acts. And I have to follow Tom. I was not going to read this poem, but I showed it to Tom because recently I had watched one of his YouTube videos at the fellowship, and he had written a poem about growing old. And I thought this would be a good companion piece to that. And as the last person now in our family, it also meant more to me. I don't remember the exact year, of course, that I heard this. It was on an LP record of poetry, and it must have been 60 years ago. But it was meaningful, and I was going to offer it as a companion piece, but in the interest of time, I was going to cut it out. But when I showed it to Tom and a few other people, they said, read it. And so I will. So blame them. It's about an old man. It was written about an old man, and a younger man was speaking about him. It was about the time of the Revolutionary War, the Boston Tea Party. So there's a reference to clothing later on that you'll understand. And it goes like this. I saw him once before as he passed by the door, and again the pavement stones resound as he totters o'er the ground with his cane. They say that in his prime, ere the pruning knife of time cut him down, not a better man was found by the crier on his rounds through the town. But now he walks the streets and he looks at all he meets, sad and wan. And he shakes his feeble head as if he said, they are gone. The mossy marbles rest upon the lips that he has pressed in their bloom, and the names he loved to hear have been written on the tomb. My grandmama has said, poor old lady, she is dead long ago, that he had a Roman nose and his cheeks were like a rose in the snow. But now his nose is thin and it rests upon his chin like a staff. And a crook is in his back and a melancholy crack in his laugh. I know it's a sin for me to sit and grin at him here, but the old three-cornered hat and the breeches and all that are so queer. But if I should live to be the last leaf upon the tree in the spring, let them smile as I do now at the old forsaken bough where I cling. Got through that. A lot of times, for whatever reason, parts of a movie or parts of something I've read stick in my mind, and I hear them repetitively. And when I was sitting down to write Francis's obituary, like many of you, you were wondering, what am I going to say? And my mind jumped to a scene in the movie Top Gun. You remember Maverick and Top Gun? I'm sure a lot of you saw it years ago. It's the final scene where the airplanes are meeting. One of his compatriots is all alone, and he's surrounded by many enemy planes. And Tom happened to be the last plane that was able to launch off the carrier before the catapult broke, and they couldn't launch anymore, so everything depended upon him. And he arrived at the coordinates and saw the battle going on, but he froze. He didn't know what to say. He didn't know, not what to say, he didn't know what to do. But the scene shifts, and we see his hand. The backseater, the radio man, the weapons man, had been killed in a training accident, and Tom Cruise, the Maverick, felt responsible for that and guilty. And when he got to the scene, he just didn't know what to do, even though he was really the best of the pilots on the whole aircraft carrier. But he raised his hands, and we saw in his hands the dog tags that had belonged to Goose, the man. And he looked at them and he said something to the effect of, "Goose, talk to me, talk to me." Well, when I sat down to write the obituary, it was kind of a one-sided conversation mentally, but I said, "Francis, speak to me, help me out here." So I got through that, and many of you have read the obituary online. Well, similarly, when it came time to do the eulogy, again, I was wondering, what can I say that was different than what was in the obituary? And a scene from Star Wars came to me this time. And it's one where Luke and his starfighter have crashed in a marsh or whatever it was, but the starfighter was collapsed in the water and it was half submerged, and he got out of the water and he was dripping and he didn't know what to do. And Yoda, I think it was, or maybe it was Obi-Wan, appeared and said, "Luke, use the Force." And he tried. And slowly he was concentrating, and slowly the starfighter started to come out of the water. And it got a couple of feet high, and then it crashed back into the water, and Luke was just exhausted. He didn't know what to do, and again the admonition, "Use the Force," was said. And he said something to the effect, "Master, I will try," to which the master said, "There is no try, do or do not." So what you got today, or what you're about to get, is, well, you can blame it on Yoda, you could blame it on Francis, you can blame it on Goose, take your pick. I want to tell you a little bit about the family, because in some ways it set the tone for who Francis is, and in some ways it's how he deviated so much. Mom was born in 1906, Dad in 1907. They were married in 1929, almost 97 years ago. And Richard, the firstborn, was born in 1930. Jean, or Eugene, was born in 1931, Francis in 1940, and me in 1946. That gave me, as the last-born, the chance to observe and learn what to do and what not to do in the house and around the neighborhood, and certainly in the Catholic school. But I had the advantage of observation, and that was good for me. Richard, being the oldest child, was the typical oldest child, dutiful, rule-obeying. Jean decided that role was taken, if you know family theory. And so he became the social person, and he didn't mind bending or breaking some rules. Francis came along, and he got all the artistic talent. He got most of the musical talent. I struggled to play a drum in the band. And he was also the most studious, and I think the most intelligent in the family. Then there was me, of course, and all of those roles were taken. And I happened to really love baseball. And so in the summer, the way our town was set up, we had a coach, and at 8 o'clock in the morning, the youngest kids, getting out of bed earlier than the teenagers, would go to the baseball park, and we would play for an hour. Then the next oldest group would come in, and then the teenagers would come dragging in. And we always hoped, I did anyway, that there wouldn't be enough for two teams and I would get to play. There were a lot of things around the house left over, of course, from those older people in the family. Lots of records that were popular in the day, and things like the baseball gloves that looked more like catcher's mitts or, puffed out hands than anything else. Lots of fishing rods and toy guns. There were so many pictures of me with some sort of toy gun somewhere, but there were real guns also. And sometimes the family needed a little extra food, and I was more than willing to go out and help hunt it or fish it. I gave that up when I was probably a teenager because as I was putting a worm on a hook, I realized the worm wasn't enjoying this very much, not nearly the way that I was. And so in some way I became a Buddhist, I guess, and I decided to give it up. Richard and Jean, being a year apart, graduated, of course, different times, and both of them went into the Air Force, 4-year commitments. Jean went to Japan, Richard went to Libya, and they would send home items which told us that they were far away, but we were always on their mind. And I wish I had some of those things today, but you outgrow those things, and your parents kind of toss them, and they're gone. But when Richard and Jean were gone, we essentially became a second family, Francis and I. And I remember one night when he was on the carpet in front of the television, and he was bent over, on his elbows, and his rear was up in the air. And I had watched too many cartoons. That was too good an opportunity to pass up, so I walked up behind him and stuck him in the rear with a pin and got the exact reaction that you saw in the cartoons of the day, but he didn't appreciate it. We ended up doing a lot of traveling together. Before I was able to drive, of course, he drove, and we went mainly to Colorado to see our oldest brother, Richard, and his family. And Francis, having studied in Scotland, became very good friends with a family over there, and they had immigrated to Canada, to Calgary, Alberta. And if you've never been there, please go. It's worth the time. Beautiful in the winter when I've skied there and frozen my fingers off. And in the summer when Lake Louise is what we used to call ice blue aqua velva, for men who remember that as an aftershave. But we did that travel. We went up there, we saw them and the countryside, and traveled eastward across Highway 1 and down through the Badlands and to Mount Rushmore before we came home. Francis loved his Plymouth Barracuda. It was a race car. It was silver. It had a wide blue stripe that just transferred all the way from the front of the car to the back. And that long sloping window, when we were traveling out west and driving at night, I would put the back seat down and just lie there and look up at the stars. And you didn't really get that kind of panorama in the city area, or even in a small town for that matter. But once I began coming out here in the summertime for some of the classes at A.R.E., Francis decided that maybe I needed a little bit more education. And at the same time, he was studying for his massage license. And so on the travels to Williamsburg and Jamestown and Mount Vernon and otherwise, I would ask him the questions that he thought might be on the test. I guess they had a test that they could study from. And that helped pass the time quite a bit. But I wanted to go back to Washington, D.C. I wanted to go to Arlington. I wanted to go to the Vietnam Memorial. You see, I was in the Army during the latter part of the Vietnam War, but I was not sent to Vietnam, as were many of my training partners. And I was sent to Germany, and through an incredible series of events and circumstances and people that it's just incredible that it turned out that way, but I thank them. But I still had and still have a fair degree of survivor's guilt over that. Francis, you mentioned San Francisco. Again, you have to understand that Marceline was a very small town, like 2,500 people, 3,000 when it was really at its tops, and it wasn't that when I was there. And Dad, having worked on the railroad, was able to get me a pass on the Santa Fe and the Super Chief, and I could leave there and go through the Southwest and back up to California, where Francis met me. And he, at that time, was living on the hill where Coit Tower was. This was quite a change for a small town kid in 1967 at the height of the Haight-Ashbury district, and I'm sure you have pictures in your mind of the tie-dye clothing and the long hair and the singing and the flowers in your hair and all of those things that I had seen on television, but to experience it, that was a major event for me, and I really felt alive. The colors were so vivid, and I told Francis that. He kind of took it in stride. You see, for him, it was just another adventure. For me, it was an experience. When I went to college, Francis was teaching at Stevens College, and we had a third roommate from our hometown, and that first year, second year, was overwhelming for me. I was used to classes of 15, 20 kids, and suddenly I was in a class with 500 kids. I was so naive. Having been brought up in that small town and taught to believe what I was taught about everything, and suddenly being in classes where students my age had totally different opinions of things like life after death or morality or anything else, it was a shock to me. Now, Francis never intervened. I'm sure he was there watching out for me. And there were times when I asked him for help, and he was more than happy to do that. Pulled my little rear out of the fire a couple of times. That was the kind of person he was. He was there, he was in the background, but he was there, just like the birthday card said, and I knew that. Now, Francis and I actually are quite different. Were, I guess, is the best tense on that. To fully understand that, some of you may have seen a movie that came out in 1981 called My Dinner with Andre. Some of you are nodding. It's highly verbally intensive, and you really have to pay attention. It's about two men who were very successful in their own ways on the Broadway scene in New York. Wallace Shawn, these are their real names, and the names they use as the characters. Wallace Shawn was one, and what was the other? Andre Gregory. Now, Andre Gregory had been very successful. He had made a lot of money, he had a lot of fame, he had a family, and he chose to give it up because in those days we called it self-actualization. You know, you did whatever you do to make yourself whole, including leaving all of the things behind you. Wallace Shawn, on the other hand, played the more pragmatic character, whose life was kind of humdrum by comparison to Andre. You see, Andre believed that life was to be spiritual, but it was to be intensely experiential. And he was determined not to succumb to the common, ordinary life that everybody else around him was leading. And you can see where I'm going with this. Wallace, on the other hand, believed that, yeah, you worked every day, you made money to buy the necessities and the comforts of life, and you surrounded yourself with people who let you be yourself. That was a good enough experience. But that was not to be for Andre. Ultimately, I looked this up on Wikipedia, one reviewer put it, ultimately the film asks you to reflect on whether you are actually living your life or simply going through the motions. Now, they had a friendly debate, but it was highly intense, and each one arguing for the choices that they made that governed their lives and made the difference in their lives. Francis was not athletic. Some of you may have known that. He once tried snow skiing, but quickly hurt his knee and decided he wasn't going to do that anymore. But he, like all of the others of us in this small town, there was a lake, and there was no swimming pool. And in the summer, of course, anybody worth their salt that the parents would let out of the house would try to go down to that lake and swim. And Francis did that with his fellow teens. And there was also I'll say a teen hangout that sometimes became a little bit notorious, as in small towns, there are other small towns nearby. And so you have some rivalry, not just over football, or basketball, the only two sports that really those towns supported, but sometimes for the females in those towns. And so there sometimes were altercations there that I'm sure Francis didn't participate in. So anyway, he was more intent on educating himself, and he spent a great deal of time, as I'm sure you know, reading and reading and reading. And I think that contributed immensely to the broad range of things that he read. I, on the other hand, was, again, very happy, like Wallace, to just live my life day to day, and especially if there was a sport involved. Our parents were very hardworking people, but I never once remember them complaining. And in the interest of time, I cut out a couple of stories that I thought really exemplified them. But I do want to tell you about one. In a couple of years before my older brother Gene died, he was rummaging through some things, and he found something that our mother had written. This is a copy in her handwriting. And I just want to read it and let you know, well, you can make your own judgments, I guess. This was Christmas time in the 1930s, when a job was a job and Dad did what he had to do to put food on the table. He worked in the coal mines for a while and later developed black lung. I remember him being so sunburned, the story, I wasn't there of course, that one of the jobs was to go to the local reservoir and pull the moss and the scum away from the filtration system. And of course, from the waist up, he was just terribly burned by that. But a man did what he had to do. He had 2 children, very young children, to care for. So Mom wrote this before Christmas Eve. And she said, "Dear little boys, I am leaving you just these very few lines to let you know I am awfully sorry I could not give you all the toys you asked for. You see, Richard and Eugene, I have lots of poor boys to visit this year, and I know that you would not want me to forget them, so I'm dividing the toys with some of the other little fellows." "These toys I have left are for both. You must not be selfish now and play with them together. If you are good boys, I will come again to see you next Christmas, and maybe it will be a better one. Well, so long, Santa Claus. P.S. Remember the toys are for both to play together. And I've often wondered, as I've read that this is a prized possession of mine, what goes through the mind of a mother and a father knowing that they're going to disappoint their children. Some of you may have been in that situation, both as a parent or as a child. But with subsistence living, having been through the Depression, providing food and working hard, that was their priority. It governed their lives, and so on that night in 1967, when Francis walked into the kitchen and I was in the living room, they had this discussion, and Francis told them that he was leaving for California. He was leaving a job that he had with a regular income, and Dad and Mom had no way to fathom why a person would do this, to go someplace without anything there waiting for you. It was an existential crisis for them, but Francis couldn't see any reason not to go. He was eager to be on his way. And it was kind of like, Frank Sinatra sung so many times, I did it my way. But I prefer to think it more like Joseph Campbell told a lot of his comparative religion students when they would come for their conference with him, perhaps an exit conference, and they would naturally, like many of us, reaching the end of our college degree, wonder, what do I really want to do? And they would ask him, and he always had the same 3-word answer: follow your bliss. Follow your bliss. I want to tell you, though, that as much as I admired Francis, I also felt sorry for him. His was not the most healthy of bodies. Many of you, are familiar with him wearing glasses, but you may not have known that he was legally blind. It was 20/200. And in at least one eye, he wore prisms to force the muscle, to force the eye to focus where the other eye was. And that was a hardship for him because he depended so much on his eyesight to read and to watch things, of course. And his hearing was not always what you experienced out here, nor what I experienced growing up, or when we were living together in college, or when we traveled together. But his hearing did diminish, and it happened to be the same kind of frequency loss that our mother had, which happens to be the range in which I speak. I can't tell you how many times I tried to talk with him, and whether we were 6 feet apart on the sofas and with him with his hearing aids and whatnot, he just couldn't follow me. He might get a word here or there and try to put it into a context which sometimes was right and sometimes was wrong. It was very frustrating for both of us and would always lead to the same eventuality, which was he would put on his headphones and go back to the computer, and I would return to whatever I was doing. I feel like I missed asking him so many things that I'll never know the answer to. And in recent years, both of our voices seem to develop the same hoarseness and raspiness. And I know that he felt that threatened his continued existence in the groups that he loved so much. Well, that was the easy part of this. I'm going to conclude now with something I think is appropriate. I think it represents Francis and what many of us thought about him, but it was the last part of the eulogy that Ted Kennedy did for Bobby. if you remember any of that from that awful 1968 year. And it goes like this. He gave us strength in times of trouble, wisdom in times of uncertainty, and sharing in times of happiness. He will always be by our side. Love is not an easy thing to put into words, nor is loyalty or joy or trust. But he was all of these. He loved life completely, and he loved it and lived it intensely. And he goes on, my brother need not be idealized or enlarged in death beyond what he was in life. He should be remembered simply as a good and decent man who saw wrong and tried to right it, saw suffering and tried to heal it, saw war and tried to end it. Those of us who loved him and who take him to his rest today pray that what he was to us and what he wished for others will someday come to pass for all the world. Bruce, another movie reference just for you. You're my Clarence in A Wonderful Life, and you've certainly earned your wings. To the rest of you, especially to those of you who willingly visited Francis in those last 2 weeks of his life, you have my profound admiration. You have my profound gratitude. And all I can say is thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right, Bruce, it's all yours.
So now we invite the Sounds of Joy to share their beautiful music.
Dan, would you bring the music stand?
Joan, up down there or up here?
Man up there, ladies.
That last song just really touched all of us, didn't it? Wow. I think it was really Francis's whole life encapsulated in one song. All that love. Okay, we're now coming to the end of the service, and I just thought the way I like to end services like this is for all of us to kind of like, let's wish Francis a bon voyage as he begins his journey on the other side. And I'd like to do that by us all just becoming quiet for a few moments and listen in your own way. Just talk to Francis and wish him well. And so, Francis, brother, we love you so much. We know you're in a good space right now. We all feel your presence. We see you in the hands of the Lord Jesus, guiding you home. And we affirm that your life on the other side will be wonderful. We thank you for all the good gifts you gave this world during your course of your lifetime. And so it is in thy name we do pray, dear God. Amen. Amen. Okay, well, this brings us to the close of the service. I had just a quick break. I promised to goodness it's real quick. A couple of announcements. We have, let's see. First thing but we can have some wonderful refreshments now for following the service, so please stay for that. And if everybody could just, I believe they wanted people to start on this side. And I want to thank Donna Corbett in particular for being in charge of catering. That was a huge responsibility. And so many thanks to Donna and to all of her helpers. Secondly, I'd like to thank thank Merlan Butler for all that she's done with the artwork. She told me she spent like 40 hours putting all this together, so thank you very much to Merlan Butler. And Merlan also asked that we announce that she's going to have a Zoom recording. She's going to have a special birthday for Francis on his birthday in January. And if you'd like to receive that in a Zoom recording, StreamFlow, please sign a list over here and give her your email address so she can send you that, and you can attend that if you like. The last thing I want to say is that there's going to be a special concert tonight at the Fellowship of the Inner Light, 600 block of 14th Street, in honor of Francis. John Christian, who's who's come over from England and really he's going to be leading it, and Chris Van Cleve is going to be singing as well. So if you can come at 7 o'clock tonight, once again, it's Fellowship of the Inner Light on the 600 block of 14th Street. And so that does bring us to the close here, and I thank everybody who participated today. I think it's been a very special and meaningful service. Thank you very much.